It was 3:07 a.m. when I woke up, but I didn't know why. No nightmare, no noise that I could remember. Just that strange, heavy kind of awareness, like something had been standing in the room a second before, watching me sleep, and only now had stepped away. The room was dim, lit only by the sickly orange streetlight that seeped through the thin curtain. I could see the shadow of the curtain's folds swaying slightly. My first thought was that I'd left the window open, but I knew I hadn't. It was late November, and the nights were too cold. For a few seconds, I just lay there, staring at the ceiling. My heart was already beating faster than it should. I told myself it was nothing, maybe just the draft from the old radiator. But then I heard it soft, deliberate, like the slow dragging of a fingernail over glass. I froze. The sound came again. Scrape. Scrape. Pause. It wasn't random. It was steady, controlled. That's when I turned my head toward the window. The curtains were drawn, but the thin fabric was light enough that I could see vague shapes beyond it, the faint outline of the window frame, the blurry suggestion of the streetlight outside, and something else. At first, I thought it was a trick of the lightsome shadow from the branches of the big maple tree that grew outside my building. But the maple didn't reach my floor. I was on the third story. The outline was too close, too distinct, and it wasn't moving like branches in the wind. It was ahead, perfectly still. I propped myself up slowly, my breath caught in my throat. I was telling myself all the rational things. Maybe it's a reflection, maybe a neighbor leaning out from the fire escape. But the fire escape was on the opposite side of the building, and no one could just stand on thin air outside that glass. The scraping sound stopped. The shadow didn't. I inched closer to the curtain, my bare feet cold on the wooden floor. Every step felt louder than it should have. The closer I got, the more I could make out the shape smooth at the top, narrowing at the chin. The head was tilted slightly, as though whoever or whatever it was leaning in to see through the glass. I reached the curtain and stopped. For a long second, I didn't move. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the stubborn need to prove it was nothing, but I took the edge of the curtain between my fingers and pulled it back just 2 inches. The first thing I saw were the eyes, wide, dark, unblinking, and they were looking right at me. I slammed the curtain shut and stumbled back so fast I nearly tripped over the rug. My breath came in shallow bursts. I wanted to convince myself I'd imagined it, but there had been details, too many details. The pale skin, the deep lines running from the nose to the corners of the mouth. The way the eyes didn't have that glimmer of life you expect in a human stare. I didn't look again, not right away. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and switched on the flashlight, shining it around the room like that tiny LED could actually protect me. Then I dialed the building's night security. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "Yeah, this is apartment 3C, I said, try in hand, failing to keep my voice even. "I think there's someone outside my window." A pause. "On the 3rd floor." "Yes," I snapped. "I just saw a face. Someone's out there." The guard sighed, like I'd just told him I'd lost my mail. "Nobody can get to your window. There's nothing out there. You're probably seeing reflections. Street's quiet. Just can you check?" I asked. Another pause. "Fine. I'll walk around." He hung up. I stood there in the dark, clutching my phone, staring at the curtain. I told myself he was right. It had to be a reflection. but the way those eyes had locked onto mine. No, I knew what I'd seen. 5 minutes passed, 10. No call back from the guard. No knock at my door. And then, just as I was thinking of calling him, again the scraping started once more. The sound was softer this time, almost hesitant, like whoever or whatever was on the other side of that glass wanted to remind me they were still there. Scrape, pause. Scrape. Every hair on my arms stood on end. I didn't move at first. I just stood frozen in the middle of the room, my phone light still on, but aimed at the floor. I wanted to call the guard again, but some small, irrational part of me thought, if I move too much, it will know I'm here. My apartment suddenly felt very small, just a single bedroom, living room, kitchen, and that window in my room looking straight onto nothing but air. I thought about grabbing my keys and leaving, but the front door was across the room, and to get there I'd have to pass that window. And then the scraping stopped. The silence was somehow worse. Pressed against my ears, made my pulse feel even louder. I stared at the curtain, waiting for it to twitch or move. Nothing. I took a deep breath, forcing my feet forward one step at a time, until I was close enough to hear the faint ticking of the old wall clock. With my free hand, I reached for the curtain again. My fingers shook. I pulled it open. Empty. The streetlight glowed over the empty alley below. The brick wall across from me was slick with rain, its surface catching tiny droplets of orange light. There was nowhere for anyone to stand. No ledge, no balcony, just open air. I stared for a while, my breath fogging the glass, before I finally shut the curtain and backed away. I told myself, okay, maybe it was a shadow, maybe my mind's playing tricks. I lay back in bed, but every time my eyelids dropped, I saw those eyes again wide, unblinking. The kind of stare that feels like it's drilling through you. By 4:30 a.m., I still hadn't slept. I sat there scrolling through my phone, reading articles about seeing faces in the dark and tricks of light caused by street lamps. I even convinced myself enough to laugh at it a little. And that's when I noticed something. The rain had stopped. The air was still, but my curtain was swaying. It wasn't much, just a slow, almost lazy movement, like the kind you get when you've left a window cracked. But I knew the window was shut. I'd checked. I stood up, my legs stiff from sitting so long. The moment I reached the window, the swaying stopped. I pressed my palm against the glass. It was ice cold, colder than it should have been. I tried to peer through the curtain, but it was too dark to see anything except a faint glow. I pulled it back in one motion, half expecting to see those eyes again. Nothing. My reflection stared back at me from the dark pane. My hair was messy, my eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. For a second, I even smiled at my own paranoia. But the smile didn't last long, because in the reflection, over my own shoulder, I saw movement. I spun around. The room was empty. A chill rolled down my spine so hard I felt my teeth ache. I turned back to the glass, looking closer this time, not at my reflection, but at the edges of it. And that's when I saw it. Faint, almost invisible in the dark, the greasy outline of a handprint. Not on my side of the glass. Outside, my stomach dropped. I stepped back, trying to remember every detail from earlier, how high up I was, how impossible it would be for anyone to leave a mark there. Just as I reached for my phone to take a picture, my screen lit up on its own. It was a notification from the building's security app, motion detected near apartment. 3C attached was a blurry still image from one of the exterior cameras. It showed my window, a and behind the glass, half hidden in shadow, was a pale oval shape. The face. My thumb hovered over the image, zooming in until the pixels blurred. The face wasn't crystal clear, but it was enough pale skin, dark eyes, no visible eyebrows. The angle of it told me something strange. It wasn't looking into my window, it was looking up, like there was something above me. I felt my knees go weak. My building didn't have balconies or overhangs. Above my unit was just another brick wall and the roof. I told myself the camera must have caught some kind of glitch, maybe a light flare or an insect close to the lens, but I couldn't shake the way the head shape felt. Human. I called the security desk again. Same guard. His voice was flat, almost irritated. You again, he muttered. I'm telling you, there's someone outside my window, I said, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. Check the motion alert, it's in the system. I saw it, he replied. Doesn't look like a person. Probably a bag caught in the wind or something. At 3 a.m, he didn't answer. Then, almost reluctantly, he added, I'll do another round. I hung up, but I didn't feel any better. The worst part, I couldn't bring myself to close my eyes. Every time I tried, my mind replayed that split-second image in the camera still like. The face wasn't pressed against the glass, but hanging there, suspended in the dark. By 5:15, I'd given up on sleep. I sat at my kitchen table, nursing cold coffee, my ears straining for the slightest sound. The city outside was starting to wake up distant traffic. A dog barking somewhere far off. That's when I heard the tap. Not a scrape this time, not a knock, just one sharp, deliberate tap on the glass. I didn't move, I didn't breathe, and then it came again. Tap. Tap, slow, even. I knew I should grab my phone, but I didn't. Some primal instinct had kicked in, telling me, don't turn your back to it, don't look away. And then, so faint I almost missed it, I heard a voice, right outside the glass. It wasn't words, not at first. Just a low, broken whisper, like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of dry air. My heart was in my throat. Then it became clearer. Let me in. I froze, my mind a blur of disbelief and raw fear. The voice was neither young nor old. It had that cracked, weathered tone that made it impossible to place an age. Tap. Tap. I stepped backward until my calves hit the edge of my bed. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. Who's there? I managed to choke out silence. I took another step back, fumbling for my phone, and started to dial 911. The moment I hit the last number, there was movement, fast, sudden. The curtain shifted in a way that wasn't from the wind, and then, nothing. By the time the dispatcher answered, I was standing in the middle of my room, my voice shaking as I told her there was someone at my window. She asked the usual questions. Description, whether they'd tried to break in. I explained it all, even the camera still. 2 officers showed up 20 minutes later. They were polite, but I could see it in their eyes. They didn't believe me. One of them went outside with a flashlight, scanning the brick wall. The other checked my locks and window latches. Nothing here, the first officer said when he came back in. There's no way someone could have been out there without a ladder. And there's no ladder. I wanted to protest, to tell them. They were wrong, but the words caught in my throat. When they left, I was alone again. I stood at the window for a long time, staring out into the empty alley. The streetlight painting everything in that same sick orange glow. And then I saw it just at the edge of the light's reach, in the deepest shadow of the alley. A face, not moving, not blinking, watching. I blinked, and the face was gone. The streetlight buzzed faintly, flickering once, and then everything was still again. I told myself it could have been anything, a patch of light, a trick of my tired eyes, but deep down I knew better. I didn't sleep that night. When the sun finally started creeping up between the buildings, the world seemed safer, but only barely. I tried to go about my day, shower, breakfast, answering emails, but every time I passed that window, my chest tightened. By noon, I convinced myself I needed to prove, one way or another, that there was a logical explanation. So I did something I immediately regretted. I decided to check the outside of my building. I walked the block to where the alley opened, the pavement still damp from last night's rain. The brick wall of my building rose straight up from the concrete, no footholds, no fire escape, nothing but a sheer drop. I craned my neck, trying to spot my window 3 stories above. That's when I saw it. A faint greasy smudge just to the side of the glass, too high for anyone to touch from the ground. The exact size and shape of a palm. The air felt heavier suddenly, colder even in the weak midday sun. I pulled out my phone to take a picture, but from this angle the glare made it impossible. I'd have to go back upstairs to get a better view. Inside, I positioned myself by the window and peered out. The mark was definitely on the outside. The more I stared, the more I noticed other faint streaks radiating from it, like someone had been pressing their hand there, shifting slightly, over and over. That night, I decided to keep my phone's camera rolling, propped up to face the glass, while I tried to rest. Maybe, if it came back, I'd have proof. The recording ran for hours. At first, nothing happened. The streetlight flickered, shadows shifted as cars passed on the main road, and now and then I could hear the distant rumble of delivery trucks. Then, at exactly 3:12 a.m., there was movement. Not fast, not sudden, just something sliding into frame. A pale oval shape right against the glass. It stayed there, unmoving, for almost 30 seconds. And then a hand rose slowly into view, pressing flat against the pane. I watched in frozen disbelief as the fingers began to tap. Not randomly, with 3 taps, pause. 3 taps. The figure didn't lean forward enough for me to see its full face in the video, but the way it moved was wrong. The hand's angle didn't make sense. It looked like the wrist was bent backward farther than a human joint should go. Then, without warning, the camera feed went dark. I scrambled out of bed, heart pounding, to check my phone. The app was still running, but the lens was completely blocked. I grabbed it, angling it toward me. Nothing was covering it. I tapped to review the footage. The last frame before it cut out showed something I still can't explain. The face. Not outside, inside. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my mind refusing to process what I was looking at. The face was too close to the lens. Features warped by the proximity, skin pale to the point of looking translucent, lips cracked, eyes dark and wide, but strangely unfocused. My first thought was, it's a glitch. Has to be a glitch. But the part that killed that thought was the tiny detail, the reflection of my own curtain in those dark eyes. It had been inside my apartment. I tore the blanket off and scanned the room. My heart was hammering so hard it hurt. Everything looked exactly the same. Door locked, window shut, no sign of forced entry. But every corner suddenly felt darker, every shadow deeper. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, An old metal lampstand moved slowly toward the living room, switching on every light as I went. My apartment wasn't big. It took less than a minute to sweep through it. Nothing, except for the smell. It was faint, but enough to turn my stomach, damp, metallic, like wet rust left to rot. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the couch with the lamp in one hand and my phone in the other, staring at the front door. I must have checked the lock 100 times. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind. I was leaving. I didn't care about breaking the lease or how insane I sounded. I was done. I started packing, shoving clothes and essentials into a duffel bag. Every few minutes, I'd glance toward the window, making sure the curtains were drawn tight. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a notification from the building's security. App motion detected near apartment 3C. Against every instinct screaming at me not to look, I opened it. The feed showed my door from the hallway camera. At first, nothing. Then, a shadow slid across the floor, stretching toward the bottom of my door like it was reaching for the crack. It stopped, and then, so slowly I almost didn't catch it. The shadow's edge rippled like fingers curling. I dropped my phone and grabbed my bag. No more waiting, no more checking. I was out. When I yanked the door open, the hallway was empty. Too empty. The air felt heavier, like it was pressing down on me. I locked up out of habit, though I wasn't coming back, and headed for the elevator, but halfway down the hall, something made me stop. From somewhere behind me, so faint it barely reached my ears, I heard 3 slow, deliberate taps. I didn't turn around. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to keep moving, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. But my legs refused to listen. The taps came again. 3, slow, precise. It wasn't the hollow knock of someone hitting a wallet, was sharper, closer, like knuckles on glass. But there were no windows in this hallway. I turned, slowly, my eyes sweeping the length of the corridor, empty. I started walking again, faster this time, my footsteps echoing on the thin carpet. I could see the elevator at the far end now, its closed doors gleaming under the weak fluorescent lights. I was halfway there when the lights above me flickered once, twice, then everything went black. The taps started again. Only this time, they weren't behind me. They were right next to my ear. I stumbled back against the wall, my bag slipping from my shoulder. My hand flew to my pocket for my phone, but before I could grab it, a low whisper slid into the darkness. You. Didn't look long enough. The emergency lights flickered on. The hallway was empty. My breath came in sharp bursts as I snatched up my bag and sprinted to the elevator, jabbing the call button over and over. The elevator doors opened with a ding that felt too loud in the silence. I stepped inside, slammed the button for the ground floor, and pressed myself into the corner as the doors began to close. A shape moved at the far end of the hall. It wasn't walking, it wasn't even running. It was gliding too fast, too smooth, like it was being pulled toward me without moving its legs. I hit the door close button so hard I thought I'd crack it. The last thing I saw before the metal shut was a pale face slipping into the shadows just before reaching me. The elevator lurched downward, the old cables groaning. Halfway between floors, it shuddered and stopped. The lights flickered, and I was plunged into darkness again. Then came the tapping, not on the door, not on the walls. From above, 3 taps. Pause, 3 taps. The ceiling panel above me creaked. Slowly, And then I saw the smallest shifter corner of the panel lifting, as though something was pushing from the other side. I pressed myself flat against the elevator wall, eyes locked on that shifting panel above. My mind scrambled for possibilities: maintenance worker, loose panel, anything, but deep down, I already knew. The tapping stopped. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of my own breathing and the faint hum of the elevator's emergency light. Then, fingers pale, too thin, curling around the edge of the panel like a spider's legs. The knuckles bent at wrong angles, joints popping. Softly, as they tightened their grip, I moved to the opposite corner, my back scraping the metal wall. My heart felt like it was trying to tear through my chest. The panel lifted higher, revealing not darkness, but the faint outline of a face above a face I knew. The same pale skin, the same unblinking dark eyes. But now they were inverted, staring down at me from an impossible angle, like the head was dangling upside down. It opened its mouth. No sound came out, just the faint hiss of air, as though it were breathing me in. The elevator jolted violently, dropping a few feet before slamming to a stop again. The panel above clanged shut, cutting off that face, but I wasn't sure if it was gone or just waiting. I hammered the emergency call button, my voice cracking. As I yelled for help, a distorted voice came through the speaker, telling me to stay calm, that someone was on the way. I didn't take my eyes off the ceiling. Minutes stretched like hours. Every tiny groan of the cables sounded like movement. Above me, every flicker of the light made me brace for that face to return. Finally, with a shudder, the elevator began to descend again. The doors slid open to the lobby, where 2 firefighters were waiting. I stumbled out, nearly tripping over my own bag. They asked if I was hurt, but all I could manage was, "There's someone in the shaft." One of them looked at the other, then back at me. "Impossible," he said. "We checked before we came down. Shaft was empty." I wanted to argue, to demand they check again, but something stopped me over the firefighter's shoulder, in the reflection of the lobbies. Glass doors, I saw it, far back in the elevator, just before the doors closed, a pale face staring out. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I've moved out of the building, changed jobs, even switched cities. I told myself I was leaving the memory behind, but the truth is, it followed me. It's always the same. 3 a.m. I'll wake up without knowing why. My chest tight, the room too still. And then I'll see it reflected in the black glass of my bedroom window. A pale face, motionless, watching. If I get up and look outside, there's nothing. But the reflection remains. I've stopped trying to sleep through it. Instead, I just sit there, curtains drawn, waiting for the first light of morning. Because I know, if I ever fall asleep at 3 a.m., I might wake up to find it on the inside of the glass.